My arm glutes are looking fantastic. I have pulled so many barves this month, I could take on Goku, since I mistakenly misidentified Bioware as a fantasy video game making studio, when in reality, they identify as non-profitable. That horrible bunch of scenes where you get lectured in a coffee shop for a microaggression, or watch modern writers flounder in their attempts to write a believable romance, or at least a romance that doesn't make everyone want to barf all over the floor, that's the entire game. Yes, journalists tried very hard to hide this. They acted like it was just one or two scenes out of context. Well, it didn't take very long for everyone to realize that is the entire game. The writing never gets better, it never stops preaching, and it never becomes immersive. It is non-stop ideology and lectures. And gamers have decided to refund the game because it was not what they were told. They canceled pre-orders, they're very disappointed. This is a game that potentially cost $250 million and took a decade to make. It'll need a bare minimum 5 million sales to break even, but potentially closer to 8 or 9 million. And it has been reported between 500 to 700,000 sales. And that might be before cancellations and refunds are taken into account. I honestly thought the name alone was a guaranteed day one 2 million sales before people realized how bad it was. And it would still fail to hit 5 million overall. It might not hit 2 million by year end. And while that would be great for most games, you need to keep in mind that this is among the most expensive games ever made. A huge studio took a decade to make this thing. Review scores were manipulated to be positive. The likely target might have been exec bonuses for Metacritic scores, pre-order numbers, and day one sales. Meaning, if the game hits certain metrics in those categories, it'll make the CEO and other executives more money individually. And then the hope that players will not try to cancel or refund the game, since that takes effort, and it is a very common thing for companies to take advantage of, as most consumers do not pursue such avenues. It's the same sort of mentality that goes behind subscriptions and people not canceling useless subscriptions. If the game gets them their bonus, but fails in the long term, an exec doesn't care. They're supposed to have something called a fiduciary duty to the investors, but it is very clear in the gaming industry, executives do not really care for that. They are not held to that expectation. They only care about their personal gain, which is reflected in what their bonus goals are. And I imagine a lot of the decisions that are made poorly in gaming have to do with those bonuses. So they manipulate the process, and do not care much for the long-term damage this does to the brand, and when the goodwill asset of both Bioware and games media is so low, what's another hit to their reputation? This is the desperate action of a corporation that knows they have a bad product. There is a reason they were so cautious and controlling of the review process. We saw them do this with Cyberpunk as well, where the corporation and the journalists conspired to keep information from the players, so that when the game was launched, it completely caught gamers off guard and resulted in immediate high sale numbers. Influencers were brought out to events and given the royal treatment leading up to the launch of Redfall, and they were praising the game as being an Xbox masterpiece. They were given a 2-hour slice of the game to play, yet when the game came out, it didn't take 2 hours to realize they were lying. Everyone playing the game, streaming it at that time, made it very clear the game's AI just didn't work, it was full of problems, and instead of cinematics, it had awful PowerPoint presentations for storytelling. And it is so clear that there's a very angry group of woke activists who are furious they have been losing all year, that every single woke game has bombed, that they have been revealed to the public, and the games they try to slander and destroy, like Wukong, Space Marine 2, Stellar Blade, and many, many more, have done very well, despite their best efforts to cause them to fail. They thought they had the power to play kingmaker for studios that please and bribe them, while annihilating studios that do not pay them the tithe of the consultant fees or the DEI hires for them and their pals for these lucrative but worthless positions of power in the studio that adds nothing of value other than to keep them from attacking them in articles and slandering companies. Basically a protection fee. There was a leak from a reviewer one day before the embargo. Yes, for the millionth time in game development history, there was a games leak. Now, that's a problem, of course, for the corporation. That can be bad for EA. They lose control of the narrative. It is also bad for the reviewer. They made an agreement and can lose trust and potential future codes for reviews. And it is a breach of contract, which is never good. But who are we kidding? Gamers have never cared about leaks. We get leaks all the time. We never have meltdowns over it. This is never a problem. This time, because it's shown a light on how bad this particular game is, it caused a massive woke meltdown on social media. The woke were absolutely incensed that their beloved corporation, Electronic Arts, had one of their propaganda pieces step out of line. Yes, people really pretended that a leak was one of the worst things to ever happen in their lives. And they tried to destroy this person over it, like going after his reputation, snitching to other companies, calling the reviewer every horrible name possible. And the crazy thing is, they did it to a reviewer who quite possibly is the most lukewarm, milquetoast, mild reviewer in the scene. But hey, that's a lesson to learn. No matter how well you behave and how long you do nothing to anger the mob, they are looking for an excuse to destroy you and everything you have built, and they will do it over the slightest toe out of line. Veilguard is the last chance for the woke activists to get a woke game into the Game of the Year discussion. That's why it's so important. They were hoping it was going to be a great game desperately. So of course, they went all in as EA's puppets. Now, it still likely will be there and potentially win. But if it does, it's going to be another Game of the Year game where the journalists gave it a 9, the audience gave it a 3, further eroding what little reputation they retain and absolutely tainting any discussion around this year's Game of the Year. Access journalism is being used to deceive gamers. Journalists who act as part of the promotional material for corporations put their efforts into lying to gamers and trying to shout down anyone pointing out that Veilguard looks like a disaster. Why is this important? In most industries, there are groups that review the quality or the products. In some regulated industries, this even happens at a professional level within the industry, such as crash testing for cars or safety testing for medicine and food. For gaming, journalists were that testing. They were there to hold companies liable for what they made, to inform customers on what to expect with a game release. They help everyone. They assist developers by getting their games public notice, and gamers by letting them know information that will help them make an informed decision about their purchases. This is the cornerstone of a working free market. Consumer protection helps us make good decisions with what we do with our money, to not fall for scams and low quality products, to have information that helps us, and it helps every customer to know if a game is woke. Not just anti-woke or non-woke gamers who are tired of woke games, it helps woke gamers as well. It's like labeling two steaks, one as vegan and one as meat. A meat eater wants to make the right choice, and the vegan wants to buy the vegan steak. Knowing the ingredients in food helps us make diet choices, as well as know if something is going to make us allergic. Our industry's informants are journalists, and they have betrayed us over and over again. They will not tell us honestly what is in a game. Their tastes are completely useless for making judgments since they are so far away from the average gamer. They lack the skill and expertise as shown by their failures to complete tutorials, and this shows they can't make informed judgment themselves. They are ideologically captured, so their value revolves around a religion's indoctrination rather than a good game. And they regularly openly tell us they hate gamers and find them toxic, while they rush to the protection of the studios they should keep in check, and for years were keeping in check. Remember, this is Electronic Arts we're talking about. These journalists used to be excessively rough on this company. They used to hold them to account for everything they did. Now, it's nothing but praise. It's nothing but defense. And they are acting like Electronic Arts is an arbiter of morality. Now, some might say this is a bad thing, that games media is dying, that it has collapsed, and with it, the watchdog that looks over the industry and keeps it honest. I disagree. It is not a bad thing that journalism is dead. It is a bad thing that it got to the point where it had to die.